minutes are pretty easy on something like this, I think. But it's just, does he have to do, we have to do minutes of this?
You have to have a record
Uh-huh.
of it, and usually if you get an idea of what was discussed. Because sometimes a work session can actually have a lot of ideas in it, and you want some record. It's the executive session that you don't.
Yeah.
That's minutes after.
Yeah, those are the easiest ones. We met.
Yeah.
Well, there's only 14 reasons you can have them, but
Oh.
right now I don't think we've got. Thankfully,
Maybe we can enter that list into the record.
thankfully none of those. They're sometimes really
Yeah, you don't
not
want
so
to be,
positive.
the reasons you don't want to be,
Topics,
right?
so it's okay. Personnel.
Yeah.
negotiations, Or interviews. And honestly, right now. That's with all of that.
Had our share, but that's how we hear.
I'm over it for a while. At least 5 years.
Am I your third town manager or your fourth?
No, you're number 3.
Sorry, I didn't let you know about being here. But I'm gonna leave at 11:30, so.
Oh,
If we have
Yeah.
to go past that, I don't think I can stay.
well, I'm not sure my back will hold up
Oh,
past 11:30 anyway. That's one reason when he suggested 6 different things, I thought, we'll be here all day. No, I'm not doing it.
No,
Can't handle it.
it doesn't mean we can't. And once you get started with some of this, doesn't mean you can't incorporate some of the other topics of the discussions at our meetings. So
Right,
this
right.
is kind of the layout, the groundwork.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, because some of the others can
Well,
easily
I think we're
be,
unanimous that no one wants to spend their entire day sitting in here.
no.
Not that we don't like each other, right?
Are you calling for a motion?
Yeah. If I do, I'm sure you second it pretty quickly.
You may second yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I have 10 o'clock, so
Okay.
you want to do roll call?
Sure. Bill Clevenger,
Present.
Paul Benedictus,
Present.
De Benedictus, sorry. Gary
Answer to many
Merrick
things.
here. Sally Chardy,
Here?
John Rogers. Present. And we have Karen is just not here. Karen
Yeah,
Truman.
yeah. Too many, it's like there's too many bills in the town council and too many Karens. You gotta say which one it is. Since this is being recorded and need to mention that if you have any questions or give any input, that you're giving your consent to have it recorded and republished on our town website, on the YouTube page. Okay. Since Gary actually made it here,
Okay,
I will
thank you, Sally.
let you start off with the financial dashboard
Okay.
that you,
With Karen Himes' assistance, we've been able to put together. I've been talking about the dashboard for a few meetings here. Sally originally, maybe in April or March,
Yeah.
asked me to take what Rich had used for a high-level cash flow analysis and kind of tweak it and make sure that this group we get a regular update so they know what commitments we have and what our cash flow looks like. And this is in a workbook format, so this is one file. So if you can imagine Dash, this first page, which is very slimmed down, is the first workbook, and Detail, I'm sorry, is the second spreadsheet. And let's focus in on the Dash first. What I try to accomplish here is go out enough years to where it's relevant. Can't go out to 2035. Very difficult to go out to 2028. But I think we decided that 2028 would give us an idea of kind of what our current and midterm and maybe even long-term commitments are.
Yeah.
So Would you like to add something, Sally?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. So the first line where we have prior year ending balance, that's typically our starting point. So for 2021, if you look at the yellow box of $1.175 million, that is the ending balance as of 2020. So if you care to take a look at detail and you see a yellow box,
Karen,
hey, Karen,
Ah, great.
you'll see that we're pulling that from the ending balance. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to apply TIF revenue, interest, as well as TIF 1, TIF 2 revenue for the year of $585,000. And then what we've got is in row C is current year commitments and estimated expenses of $402,000. And when we run through that equation, we come up with a projected 2021 ending balance. Now, 402,000 is kind of a soft number. I mean, it could be 500,000, it could be 600,000. We're not done with the year yet. But just so that in our minds, we get an understanding of what kind of surplus we're going to have at the end of the year. And then, we take that 1.4 million and we start back up under 2022. We add in estimated TIF revenue and interest, and we put in commitments. And as you can see, our projected surplus at the end of 2022 is going to grow even more. And, if you kind of go out to 2028, if we don't have enough strategic, large projects to invest in, our surplus is going to grow. So at this point, I think everyone understands that, we're not going to run out of money. I think what we're going to do is we're going to be like Carnegie. We're not going to be able to donate all our money before we die. I don't mean to be morbid, but the money's just going to pile up unless we get into more strategic initiatives. And, one other good thing is we're in a low interest rate environment. So perhaps borrowing right now, leveraging our cash flow with debt, we could do a lot of good. We just need to find what good we want to do at this point. So, some of these numbers are, for example, row B, $584,600. I'm just using, 2020 numbers. I'm not growing those numbers at all into the future. But as you see under points to consider, hey, should we as a group say we'll increase that prior year number by 5% or 10% to get a more realistic feeling of what our revenues are? So the surplus I'm projecting here may be understated at this point because we're using old numbers with no built-in growth factor. And then the commitments, Karen, if you look at the detail under the blue colorings, she's done a great job in trying to extrapolate when the cash is going to be due for these projects. And it's more of an art than a science because you just don't know when projects will be.
a puzzle.
Yeah,
Nice.
when we're going to get the invoice and when we're going to pay it.
Right.
We may have allocated $90,000 for facades, but we may not get $90,000 worth of invoices in 2021. And if that happens, then our surplus is even bigger. So the point here is, and also I just wanted to, under points to consider, the TIF revenue doesn't take into consideration the executive storage facility revenue increase. I don't know. I mean, is that going to be 50 grand a year or 25 grand a year? But that revenue number isn't even taken into consideration here.
And real quick, just so this is levied, right? This is a levy amount. And what is the current levy for this? I don't know, off the top of my head.
So
And
Karen,
it's based on.
what does that mean?
So in order to get this revenue, there's an assessed value of all the property in TIF 1 that then is has a levy put to it, which is what your tax rate that you pay.
Right, okay.
So that levy shouldn't, we can fluctuate. We can't go over the amount that we said we're gonna levy, but we can always reduce the amount, which is a good PR thing. So like, for example, the school corporation in 2028, when this is done here, or is there, I thought it was 2031 was the end of the
He
tip
just, he took it out to 2028 just for planning.
for planning.
Yeah.
Okay, but is
Yeah.
it 2031?
One ends in 2032
He's got.
and
Yeah, it's
34.
in
234. Okay, so there's longer.
It's in the footnotes. I'm sorry I didn't get this to everyone earlier.
No, that's fine.
Because this is a version 2.0. I'm actually going to collect these documents after this meeting. So, and it's going to be refined. Karen and I will meet again. But we're only going, in the footnotes, it does say how long the commitments extend. If you look under TIF committed funds.
Okay. So like, so in 2028 as a school corporation, that is when our current referendum ends. So as a school corporation, we have to go every 7 years
Right.
for reallocation of that thing. So as a community, if it was a wash to say, well, you're gonna get 17 cents taken off the levy, I don't know what it is, that's why I asked what it is, but we still ask for 17 cents, your tax, it's tax neutral.
Mhm.
Now technically, it could still potentially be tax neutral just on us alone. But at any point when you can decrease the tax or corporate, we don't have a corporate tax.
No.
Just as far as that concept of knowing in the future that there are other entities that play a factor in how much is given to this tip.
I think
If PR sees that we have 6,000, 4,000, or 4 million as a balance in a tip, but then I'm going for referendum to ask for more,
Right.
for a tax neutral, it'll be a tax neutral referendum, it's to sustain what we've been doing. That would just be a
That'd be really
negative,
hard to sell.
it's just a negative,
Yeah.
it could potentially be a negative view.
Sure.
But the other thing to keep in mind is it's not the tax that they're collecting is not a separate tax rate from the town. So if the.
It's just it's lined out.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the same. So the town would actually be decreasing the
Correct.
tax levy if we're going to do that. The town would, not just
The tip.
it would also affect the town.
And then how much is this, is the EAV of the tip 1 and tip 2 going up? If we keep,
Yeah.
granting tax abatements within these TIFs, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Again,
Karen, I think this is a very high level
Sorry.
manifestation of we've got more money than we can effectively deploy. How is this going to, the group think strategically and deploy it? I don't think facade grants is going to drain this surplus. We got to think, electrical utility. We got to think power plant or, whatever, that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So,
It needs to be something substantial.
right.
Yeah.
And this isn't audited, state of Indiana doesn't see this. This is just for us to be able to say, hey, we think we can make this commitment because we have enough resources.
And as a
Right.
school corporation, I would still want to allocate that technically 15%
up
can
to- yeah.
come to us for
For
projects,
workforce and for STEM.
for capital
development.
projects
Yeah,
and, yeah.
By the way, so I'll back up. Just the conversation started from this because of this.
correct.
It's something we haven't had and can start looking at, okay, here's where we're going. We hit the reimbursement of the taxable units. If we go above 200% of our money coming in. And probably by 2025, 2026, we're there.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
we will finish out all our stellar grant, our stellar work and all the other infrastructure work that we've done. And
That's assuming that nothing more is added to
true.
it.
And,
And, I mean, if we didn't do anything
right.
and didn't have any more infrastructure projects that we were paying for, then it would continue to grow.
And
But God
I mean, it's a
knows
good
that
problem to
Culver
have.
needs,
yeah,
God knows Culver needs some good infrastructure.
It's a good problem to solve.
Right.
Correct.
It's not a good problem to have, it's just a good one to solve. So,
Correct, that's a better statement, yeah.
And for planning purposes, I mean, from our last report, we actually tip one goes out to 34.
Yeah.
Tip two goes out to 36.
Yeah.
That's on the second page of the details. Down the left side, and Gary, he's gonna send out a electronic copy, so you get both margin. Because my eyes are just having trouble with this, that's just me.
I don't have any legal papers.
No.
I
But
pretty
all of a
well-
sudden you start, we get,
Letter.
you know, we get to think of these, in these ways to address it. You're right, Sally. You know, this keeps us from getting caught short on, oh my gosh, you know.
Yeah,
Karen tells us, well, I'm doing the next report, you're gonna have to write checks back to the other taxable units because you exceed the threshold. And we don't want to be there. We're a couple of years away from that right now.
and the other thing that you don't want to do is since they're two separate TIFs, if you're paying for facades out of TIF 2, which is the smaller of the two TIFs, then you could, you know, if everybody in the entire community, all of the businesses ask for a facade grant the same year, it would deplete it.
I have a question on levy. Karen, if you reduce the levy this year, what's the ramifications for the next year? Can you raise it back up?
I believe.
Okay, so in other words, it's flexible on that one. Okay.
It used to be if you lowered it, then that was your tax levy.
Yeah,
And
okay.
now it's,
Does DGLF determine what your levy is, or do you, that's the difference between school and city, I think.
DLGF determines your tax levy. And
So
it's
there's
based on
a
that math.
Federal or state level Department of Governmental Local Finance that dictates.
Mhm.
So you have to submit your budget, and
Right.
with your budget, you're saying, I need this much levy in order to acquire that much funds for your budget.
Always taking the max.
And we have two.
And if not, our budgets would be
And like even for us, they can,
pretty
they can,
dire.
yeah, they can lower
Barely
you
scrape by on the max.
if they wanted to.
Yeah.
If they,
But what you end up getting is that is they have that assessed value of your tax rate is that based on your assessed value to.
so if our
support your
EAV
taxable
keeps
levy.
going up, that levy may go down because you
No.
can acquire.
Well,
Well,
I think
that's a
that's gonna go
school
down,
thing
then
then,
tax rate may go down.
correct.
The millage.
Yeah.
The millage may go down, yes.
Gary, I think it's great the way you did this because as a working document, we can change assumptions. We know we have better understanding of our history for assessed values going up an average of 3%. Now that in there.
Yeah, I mean, this is very, well, I should
Yeah.
say, we're just using 2020 numbers
Correct.
and
Rolling it out.
we're not adjusting for anything. I mean, maybe it goes down, but I doubt it. Just historically, it looks
Oh,
like
no,
it's
it'll
been
go
going up.
No.
One thing I do want to point out though, is, we're paying on these bonds, 3.75 and 4.5% interest.
Yeah.
I know their maturity is coming up, like in 2025 and so forth, but, perhaps we want to look into refinancing these or,
I think we looked into paying one off early
or calling them.
and that came up to actually costing,
And one was actually, we've made some sizable payments on, I think the stormwater bonds.
Mhm.
We had some money left over from that project, and so we just paid it towards the bond. I think it was close to $200,000.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
I know the maturity dates are coming up. I mean, if it was out 10 years at those rates, just those are good rates for the investor. I mean, not for the CRC, but just the thought there. But then that would give us extra money probably.
If you do a
It's-
refinance, you can extend it another 10 or 15, the bond length if you wanted,
Yeah.
not
You're
necessarily.
gonna go to extend your maturity. If rates turn around, if we're thinking of refinancing, that's something we ought to really look at.
Yeah.
Because if rates turn
Yeah.
around, it's a wash.
Yeah.
If you get the lower rate now and extend your bonds out
Yeah.
10, 15 years, than to have to go for a new bond and have a higher interest rate.
So right now, as I understand, the only one that goes out to the end of either TIF is the stormwater. Sorry.
This one.
Yeah,
stormwater.
stormwater,
That's the most recent.
and that's, 3.755. Yeah, but you're right, that's another point here.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we're looking at doing the cleaning up the tips. We also look at what we're doing here. So we wind up bonding something else, refinancing this, that could have a net better effect. And I think you're allowed to run your TIF bonds and payments out past the life of the TIF, as long as their funds. Yeah. Do that. But again, both of these, one runs out to 34 and 36. You're talking about, 15 to 16, 14 to 16 years.
Yes, that's, I mean, those are observations that, came up, that bubbled up, putting this together. I mean, so Karen and I can fine tune this, the $400,000 number that was consumed in 2021 may grow, but it's not going to move the needle as far as consuming the surplus. Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm the one that's kind of jumping on this.
I think the bond we looked at paying off early was the sewer bond, which I think is already now.
Yeah. Right.
Because we were talking to Culver Academies at the time about their sewer rate. And
That's a different.
yeah,
That's the tax.
and that one, we would have taken a huge penalty because like $80-some thousand or something. It wasn't worth paying out.
Right.
Just FYI.
What are some other larger projects that are in the strategic plan?
Well, the one that, it's not in the strategic plan, but so the property on Tamarack that we're looking at annexing for that storage unit that is in your TIF. To annex, we have to take utilities to that property. And so the developer is recommending that they do an economic expenditure agreement with Redevelopment Commission. And what happens is they would set up an agreement that would take place over 10 to 15 years. They did this in Peru and a couple other places. And you capture the TIF dollars off that property, but a certain percentage of that money goes right back to the developer to pay for the infrastructure. So the developer in this case is taking on the cost of the utilities and infrastructure that we would normally provide through annexation, but they're using a percentage of your TIF money and they get that money over 10 to 15 years. So in the case of Peru, they had an agreement that for 15 years, they get 70% of the TIF dollars. The other 30% goes to the Redevelopment Commission. But that money, that 70%, is paying for part of the project. And the benefit to the developer is obviously, normally we would pay for that utility infrastructure, but they can use that guaranteed money as collateral on this expensive project with the bank. So ideally, they would like to do that with our Redevelopment Commission on that project. So you would not capture the full amount of that money because part of it would be returned to the developer.
Unless we have the surplus that would pay for that utility to go there. Then it's more beneficial to not, unless the developer pulls out. Because they need that for the collateral, right?
I guess, technically the town already has a commitment to pay for that utility to be extended to the Howard property, which is right across the street from the cemetery. We went all the way out to the garden court, which is Wade's property. We have to extend it to the Howards and then it has to get extended to Tamarack Road. So they're open to the idea of doing the entire stretch because it's technically two pieces.
Right.
But obviously to get it to Tamarack, you got to get it to the cemetery. So from my perspective, and I think Sally's, after meeting with them, it's a win-win for both us, the town, and them, the developer. it does mean that you're forfeiting a certain percentage of that TIF money during that period of time, which is likely the time you'd have to set that agreement up to the time that TIF expires, which I believe in that case is the 32.
Yeah,
Um,
they're in TIF one.
Yeah,
TIF one, is that,
I think it's 34 and then 36.
but it's a great way for all of us to avoid
That's Beachview, right?
Any
paying for that utility.
Is that the Beachview
no,
properties?
Yeah.
Okay.
it's part of the beach view.
But
Does that impact the pressure within the town or anything by adding more utilities that direction? Like, do we have to have a bigger water tower or a bigger other thing? Like, what else is impacted when you add?
No, they're not really, I mean, there's gonna be one bathroom per unit, but they're not used on a regular basis. It's not like, they're not residential. The agreement between the leases of these places and the owner is they cannot use it for overnight stays, they cannot have parties, they cannot, I mean, they wrote all of that into the agreement before the BCA would approve the usage. So if these were residential and you were adding, 30 or 40 homes, we'd be looking at the capacity of the plant. Right now, we have capacity at our plants. We built in enough. Even bringing East Shore Corporation on, we had to look pretty closely at that at the time. So what would impact those, you'd have utilities running all the way out there across the street from Wade's property, which has potential development, and then further out, south of town would have potential development. Eventually, if you put 100 homes out there, yeah, that would impact on our utilities. But the way you build it out is up to our specs, and we would be building for future capacity.
And the town would design it for best utilization,
Yes.
for the town.
Yes, which would have to consider future development too.
Sure.
It can't
Right.
just be Tamarack Road.
And as we look at development within the TIF, that's another fit. And I realize it's easy to get to a solution. I want to bring this back to this document, but this is already facilitating conversations around
Yeah.
certain things. But back to this, I have a question, and full disclosure, Gary ran a copy by me the other day, and I went through it and just looked at some things. So I'm not that quick. They go, oh my gosh, I noticed this, I noticed that. But maintaining something like this becomes a part of our monthly financial reports. And I remember Rich had the other document, the mega sheet. How will it be difficult to maintain this and support this data? So we're taking data that's coming in here because this is what we'd be using to have a 98% accuracy of ideas. We're talking about projects and things. Will this be difficult to maintain? Will this be difficult to support? I'm asking you because your reports that go into this, how do we maintain this in the past?
Yeah. It would come from my reports, and Gary and I have talked about kind of how often to update kind of at the end of the month. And actually, I think maybe we can change that other report that I provide on a monthly basis as well to maybe be not so detailed.
Yeah,
And
it can feed, we can have
Yeah.
we can have multiple worksheets in a workbook, but then it just needs to flow to the top where we can.
we'll figure out a way to make this as easy as possible, because if it's not going to work.
Right,
So,
right. I
we'll get it taken care of.
And I
And I
like
think
to
it's
sum
important. I mean, I was happy to do this because it was an exercise.
Does it
for
make your
me.
world easier?
It does.
Good.
So, and knowing how much is committed, and when people ask me questions,
I'd forgotten.
And updated.
Yeah.
On a regular basis.
I've forgotten about the levy money, the last tranche of 13,000 for that we committed to the client.
Yeah.
Levy. And that was on that. I'd like that you capture the last couple of years. You look back at certain projects. If we wind up building a budget, which we should, there's certain things that are small in our budget, and I find it interesting. But the things that are the smallest number on here has had most of our attention. But anyway, so that's just looking at this. Those are my thoughts.
Jenny, one question, going back to something that Karen said earlier, um, about abatements. So if I understand this correctly, the agreement with developers and our participation would basically negate their asking for a tax abatement on that new development.
Yeah, I mean, they're not technically asking for an abatement. They're still paying the tax. But part of it gets returned to them to pay for the utility
Right,
infrastructure.
but that's better than having
Yeah,
having a.
At least the money goes towards something that benefits the town as well as the developer.
Yeah, abatement service.
Now's the time to ask your question, Gary, ask anybody if they got any problems, because we'll look at this 2 months and I'll go, what did you mean by doing this?
Well, like I said, I'll collect these afterwards.
The one thing,
Look at them again and I'll send out the soft copy to all members.
But there's no other larger projects in a 10-year vision that need to be, that are on the
Well,
radar.
Well,
Sewer,
We're
We're
going
looking at-
back into that economic development initiative. We need to probably launch a new comprehensive plan. I believe ours dates to 2014. Typically you do them every 7 to 10 years. We've done a lot of what's in that comp plan. So we're really heading into a planning stage. We haven't had any other new development come out. I think there's interest out there. I had a developer from Indy contact me 3 times the first week I was here. But he wanted to know how much we'll pay for.
Of course.
We'll come have a conversation and tell us what you have in mind. There is development obviously going to take place on the new Lakeshore property that was purchased at sheriff's sale, but I consider that more a one-off project and not really part of the plan.
Did the academy purchase that parcel?
No,
No, not private
private
investment.
development.
Okay.
the house too?
No, that never sold.
It didn't
No.
sell.
And, you know, it might be worth a conversation with the academy because with this topic of residential TIF, they obviously have the same housing issue that everyone else has. And so if there's thought that they might do a development, they've got a ton of land. Obviously, they're the largest landowner in the county. So strategically, I think we need to keep that in mind as well, at least from my perspective, what their needs are from a housing standpoint.
I think they tipped their hand some years back when we were looking at the possibility of a fire station on 10. They've got 75 acres plus or minus. It was across from the old Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
And they were going to give us 5 acres for a building. But I think they tipped their hand when they were saying that by doing that, they wanted an access road back in there. So I'm kind of believing that that may be still on the radar. I don't think that our service building is on the radar anymore, but I think that 75 acres might be something that they're looking at.
And we've got utilities there now because of Maple Ridge, so
Right.
that would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Plus,
Right.
plus.
If they wanted to do something.
Yeah.
We did approach them. When we did Stellar, we had a housing committee set up. We were looking at potential sites and we looked at potential developers. And from a site standpoint, we approached the academy and asked, would you sell some land or, you know, step up as an in-kind thing and we do the development side of the infrastructure utility cost side of it. And they came back with, no, we're not ready to do anything with it. But, you know, in the meantime, that housing issue's gotten a lot more challenging for them. They're recruiting new faculty and staff. It's very expensive for them to live in town and find something. So I definitely think there would be a potential for conversation. I don't know what else is on their radar in terms of, you know, construction. They have a lot of construction going on right now on campus, but housing is definitely, I think, probably risen in the leadership group over there. At least I've heard about that periodically.
it's on senior administration's mind,
Yeah,
housing is, so.
it's gotta be a challenge every time
Yeah.
contracts get signed and people want to get set up here to start their career.
Last time in 2014, when we did the strategic plan, do you remember, Jenny, if, or how the CRC was involved in that? Because as we're talking about goals and thinking about how we budget, I think it would make, I assume that we were part of those conversations with the development and economic strategic plan.
Yeah, with comprehensive planning, you do a lot of surveying, you try to get the stakeholders in the room. I would say at the time, the town manager that was here wasn't the best at facilitating a lot of that. I remember Sally and I getting pretty frustrated because
Yeah.
even the council wasn't that engaged. So we're much better at that, having been through the Stellar process. We would do that a lot differently now. We're looking at sometime in August, I'll be emailing you guys save the date cards for the Economic Development Initiative. Ideally, I'd like to get the council on board with doing comprehensive planning and economic development at the same time. We have a lot to consider with, the property in the south end of town that we're demoing. What are we doing with that? You want that as part of your comprehensive planning, quality of space or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we're pretty much tying up Stellar. We do have regional Stellar projects still. We have a big park project. We have a couple trails. It's part of that regional plan. But we're ready to kind of launch into another planning goes like this. We're definitely entering into that stage again. And what we'll do with that, once you get through that process, and it should engage literally every board, organizations, the schools, et cetera, and input. Once you get through that process, you look at that plan and do a 5-year action plan. And that for us is what started Stellar. We realized, hey, we do have 5 years worth of top priorities. Now let's go fund them. And we did that through Stellar last time around.
Yeah.
So this time around, we may not have Stellar funding, but redevelopment is on board with some of those initiatives. It'd be a great way to look at your funding.
Yeah.
And then there's still this question of broadband that would fall
Yep.
into this
Yeah,
category.
broadband
Broadband.
would play the potential for a electric utility project. If we could ever make something like that happen, either one of those would be game changers for Culver.
They are.
And they would have to be funded outside of we just don't have the revenue to support something that big.
Strikes me that the CRC budget is significant compared to the town's budget.
Yeah,
And the flexibility that CRC has because of the bond restrictions are different than on the town when the town goes to do something.
Well, basically, we don't do operations, so, fund operations, we just fund projects,
True.
bonds.
and I think you're going to see with the governor's announcements and with some of these ready grants coming out and some of this money rolling out, that broadband is going to get significant investment. He was intending that before COVID. So I think we're going to see a ton of grant dollars come out for broadband that will probably require some sort of match and would make us more competitive because we would probably have that, and a lot of rural communities won't be able to come up with those funds.
Not to solve a problem right here. And broadband's not even on our agenda, respecting that you're chasing the clock and you're chasing the clock.
Right.
We can come back to that, but Gary, is everyone good with this? What he's done?
The only thing that I noticed is under TIF revenues, TIF 1, when you expanded it out, you just got the first half of the allotment each year on the TIF
So-
1.
Under TIF revenue, for which year, Sally?
It would be 21,
Yeah, so.
21 through 28.
Right, so the reason, this is kind of a working document right now, but I don't think we've gotten the second payment yet.
Yeah.
And so basically I just reverted to using the 2021 estimate, which is in red there.
Yeah.
But we will, as Karen and I fine tune this, we will, update that.
Yeah,
accordingly.
yeah.
Because we don't really know what the payment's gonna be, right, Karen, until we get it.
Yeah, it can fluctuate. You may have some people that are behind on their property taxes and seem like a little bit more. I mean, you have a basic estimate what the commitments are, but when it hits, it's a little
Yeah,
different.
so these are more real-time numbers than just the projection.
And it wasn't the 2021, that was as of June.
yeah,
30th.
June 30th.
Yes, that's right.
You made those assumptions when you did the first page, the dashboard page. You used a full year assumption. So
Yeah,
the increase that we're talking about, the ending amounts we're talking about reflects an estimate of a full year tip in revenues.
Yeah, the surpluses that are generated are based on a full year of TIF 1, TIF 2, and interest based on 2020.
Yeah.
But
Well,
then,
I noticed in TIF 2, you did both the first draw and the second draw.
yeah,
And I just think that, for planning purposes, that estimate should be extended out like it is in TIF
Yeah.
2.
we can do that.
I mean, just because otherwise you might think that you're only getting 300,000. 200.
Yeah, 300,000 can't buy a house around here. So you got
Yeah.
Jesus. God.
How about down the street from us?
Yeah,
475.
yeah.
Well, how about that one at the State in Marmont?
Across from Karen's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
700.
Yeah, 699 or something. Might as well be 700.
Is it
Yeah.
Collins' house? Is that Collins' house?
Yeah,
The new one,
yeah,
the one the predecessor burned down?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Got it.
7 for that one?
7.
That's what they've got it listed as.
How many square foot? It's only about, it's a
It's
two-story.
smaller than my house. Well,
It's got a
I think
basement.
Got a lot of
basement,
stories.
2 garages and 2 different levels. I think there's.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Thanks. It'll get better.
Does look.
Oh, it's great.
Looks great.
This is great. Nicely done. Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
And then I have a
Thank you.
backyard. Somebody will buy it.
Okay.
That's where the EAB made, because I'm sure that assessed value of that property a year ago was 40,000 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. So, again, that's nice.
Before he torched it or after?
Actually, it didn't make much of a difference.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Maybe it was worth more after it was torched.
No,
At
this is
least-
very nice. Nice job.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gary, this is real nice. Very nice.
And thank you, Karen, for
Yeah,
working with Gary. The next item on the agenda is new business. And we've gone through some of it. I know that Paul said that he thought there were some properties that should be removed from the current TIF and some that should be added. So basically, I guess the question is, do we need to update TIF 1 and TIF 2? Or one or the other?
What properties you?
So let me back up. We haven't updated our TIFs in the last review of the TIFs in the last 10 years.
2000.
Okay, so it's been 7 years, and properties have changed. So off the top of my head, starting with the old Eagle Check Vanguard, was counted in the TIF and assessed value as a restaurant, and now it's going to get down to 0. We'll go to 0, so that's a negative impact on the dollars we get. Second is and again off the top of my head. Second is the property that just sold, the Van Hock property. That was always carried as the restaurant on the TIF.
Yeah.
It's down, and it went down to 0 value. And I can't validate it, but I heard that the developer that bought it wants to move from a C1 to an R1. So they want to put a series of townhomes in there instead of making commercial residential. I don't know about Max's Playhouse, that's barbecue place now. I don't know where that, the old Max's Playhouse.
Yeah.
Where that
That's not-
fits in.
It's not in the tip.
That's not in either tip.
Yeah, and you start looking at, we've not done a walkthrough of each of the properties in the TIF, and even using the documents that we have now, where they are, that are assessed values. There are some that are negative. Beach view properties are in the TIF. So, and they're, we're already getting some money from them that increased above the assessed value, and they will significantly more increase when they are built upon.
Yeah.
But the town is also adding other areas, and I just think it's prudent for us as we're going forward. We have this developmental tool, and we're looking at doing other projects. We should be maximizing and cleaning up our TIF, so we are maximizing the revenue that we are getting.
But I don't think you can expand the footprint.
No,
Oh, okay.
and by the way,
Yeah.
going through this, we may find that we have an opportunity for a third TIF or not.
Gotcha.
But you're right, you can expand the footprint, but I just think it's housekeeping detail that we should do, because by letting, and again, evil check
But
on
doesn't
guard.
the county update it?
No,
Provide a list to us.
Yeah.
But it's up to you whether you want to keep the, those
They're
two
automatically
properties aren't gonna.
Yeah.
So you have to keep those two properties off and not doing about.
we would
Yeah,
have to
that's-
use, we would have to use our legal and some resources, $15,000-$20,000 in resources to apply to the states to say we're modifying these things in our TIF, or dropping these, or adding these. And that was the cost barrier before, when you only had maybe one property that you were looking to do that with, it didn't make sense.
Yeah,
But
right.
it could be something that could look at this. And by the way, you
Well,
don't have to engage the resources until you review the.
Some of
The
them, it's
tips.
a matter of, is there potential for them to increase beyond the amount that they're currently, because there's a couple, one property of, that sits behind the paddocks and Boatsman's property.
Yeah.
I noticed was at a negative number.
Mhm.
However, I think that in the long term, that's going to become, if the paddocks expand in the next few years, that potentially could,
Good.
you know,
And don't know about, I haven't checked to see if Hammers is in the TIF,
Yeah.
but it's.
I went through and actually looked up 90% of these
Oh, wow.
tips. And what I'll try and do is I put a name to it. And
Mhm.
I've only got one because I didn't print, it's like 12 pages long. Print it all.
Does the tip go down Jefferson all the way to?
Boatsman, West Jefferson, Sitzma.
Yeah,
Those are in the tip?
yes,
I thought it
I
stopped.
think they took those in 2014.
Oh,
Yeah.
Didn't we
I think so.
feel like? Grant was gonna-
But I don't believe that the property that was the old mobile home park,
Mhm.
that's not in the TIF.
it's only on the north
That
side
would
of the
be,
road
yeah.
in Jefferson.
No, the property that Dickey owns, or JD
Mhm.
1 and JD 2 own, across, between Boatsman's and ACPI, is in the TIF.
Mhm.
So the marina? It's not.
No, it's not. At least I didn't find it.
You want me to zero up some for you guys?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
do we think it's appropriate as an intermediate project right now, as we're talking about, to say this is kind of easy to get done? Say, okay, let's go validate what's in the TIF. And then if we find we have enough products or enough properties in the TIF to be changed, that's worth breaking, that's going to make a significant
Yeah.
Is that
change.
map right here?
I think it's
So the green is tip.
There's the green is tip to, so there's a couple of different. So up here is one, and it's Culver Union, so it's actually in the township versus Culver, but it's part of your district. Union 2 is the area between west of the mobile home park out to State Road 17, which would be the Digby property. And then there's Culver 2 is all of ACPI's property. Then Culver 1, there's more Culver 1 south. Let's see. This would be Wade McGee's property. This is where the Beachview property is, and that's in Culver Union 1. And then everything else in pink is Culver 1. So they tipped streets on in several spots. So like all of West East Lakeshore, all the way, all of that is in the tip, and a couple of offshoots.
Yeah.
So maps here.
I'm not sure that I found that I saw Luke McGee's property in the tip, but
Yeah.
yeah,
One,
Except for
two.
this,
Yeah.
you own both
The
of them.
third one at the bottom is Tim Howard's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Dickie owns the top.
That, and then I'm guessing that's part of
That's
there.
Okay. I do not guarantee accuracy,
So
but it gives you a,
we can put it on
somewhat of a view.
the July agenda and see we get a sub, usually you'd have a sub. Okay, we'll go through. Just you're really gone through it. And the math is simple. It tells you whether it's depreciated below the assessed value or not, whether it's costing us money. And we understand why it's in there. For the life of me, I have no idea the guy across from Catty Corner from Lucretia, who just finished off the old, that was the old auto parts store.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have no idea what that's in the TIF or, but I, you
No,
know, it's just.
I didn't see it. Some of the businesses downtown, if some aren't.
Doug Farmer has his hand raised.
Okay.
And he's on.
Okay.
Hi, thank you, Karen. What's the criteria for putting a property into the TIF, and why would the old mobile home park not be in the TIF?
Probably,
It was residential.
it was,
Residential
it was,
versus
yeah, it was
commercial.
residential versus commercial. They do have to be a commercial property. For
So
the
at one
two
point,
TIFs
so
we have.
I'm sorry, Sally. At one point in time, that property was dual zoned, multi-residential, light industrial. So wouldn't that have qualified it for the TIF? And if it's not currently dual zoned, how did that get changed?
I'd have to check into that, to see what it's zoned currently.
That would be Planning commission, right?
Yeah.
Planning commission would have set the zoning or changed it.
Yeah.
The only.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I really don't recall seeing any zoning change on that.
okay. So I guess if it was changed from, so I think it still retains both dual zones, and if it was changed, I guess we were never notified or contacted to be part of that conversation. So I guess if it is, I'd like to know how and when that happened. And so with that, I guess if it were still light industrial, would it not qualify to be in the TIF?
No, I mean, just,
Light industrial doesn't qualify unless you define the.
So-
yeah,
So what is Dickey's land zoned as?
Which one?
Aggregate. The front of
The,
the house.
the one,
Or two.
R2, hold on.
Under two.
So I don't know if his is, someone can pull up the commercial code.
You'd have to look at, you know, if you
so
look,
if that one is zoned R2, how would that be in the TIF? Residential, you said it had to be commercial.
Is I-1 is the Dickey property next to.
yeah,
It's I-1.
and
property card for the old mobile home park, it's R2.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Say that again, Karen, no.
R2 is the mobile home park, and the Dickey property is what did I say, I1?
I-1.
And I would say you probably have to go back to the group that originally set those TIF property, who chose the TIF properties and
Yeah.
find out what that criteria was.
Yeah.
Because that was set back in the mid 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, it was set in 2004, 2006. The criteria
Okay,
for which places they
So
fit.
Does anybody on the council then have any insight as to how a property that was previously dual zoned can be changed without notifying the property owner?
I don't.
That would be the thing.
Yeah, that would
Planning
be
commission.
planning commission.
That is not our area. That would be planning commission.
That's not even the town council, that's plan commission, and it's a recommendation to council. And it, in my 14 years, it wasn't rezoned, because I would remember that
Yeah.
coming to council.
And same here, I've been on as long as Ginny, and I don't recall any rezoning being done on that piece of property.
Okay, so who do I have to talk to about that then? The planning commission?
I would say plan commission, or, you know, if you wanted to,
I call Marshall County.
Marshall County,
When it was changed, how it was changed.
Yeah. Marshall County could have,
Recorders.
in the recorder's office.
Plan commission can rezone whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's part of their, I don't need permission, honestly.
It's not a question of doing what they want. I think it's a question of whether or not they tend to include the property owner. That's the issue. Not doing what you want, or being able to do what you want is governed by town policy. I mean, I get that, but not just doing things blindly, I think is an inappropriate approach.
The wrong place for this.
Yeah, I don't have the answers for you. You need to check with the county recorder's office to see if and when it was changed, and check with the plan commission. Okay, moving on.
Again, this is
Yeah.
something we probably should put on the agenda next time to say,
Yeah.
we run this down, clean it up, and if it meets a threshold that it's worth us doing this and improving our cash flow for the next 15, 16 years, we do it. Because again, I think you'd said before, it was the fact that you had our attorney would be involved and it cost
Right.
about $15,000 in the past.
I think it, yeah, between 15 and 25 was the number that that I was told it cost last time. And that was basically their recollection. And I could, you know, if you want, I could call the attorney and find out what,
Yeah, maybe
but
we
I
just-
think
maybe
we
we
should
just
probably
wait
take a
and run
look.
through this first to see if it's
Yeah.
worth doing, because then we'll find out what the threshold is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just make sure I understand this right. So these last pages is TIF 1, and this is all of TIF 2?
yeah, TIF 2 is very small.
Yeah, so this is all TIF 1.
Yeah. So, and in looking at residential TIFs, you know, basically, we can discuss that at the same time. We look at cleaning up TIF 1 and TIF 2. Mainly TIF 1, I think TIF 2 is pretty much,
This gives us
Yeah.
residential TIFs, a whole, that we would actually be establishing a new TIF.
Yeah.
And all eyes turn to Ginny and stuff like this, because you're the ones to determine whether we can do this. You have to be able to tell us we meet the threshold requirement, we meet the requirement
Yeah, for residential
for
TIF.
residential TIF.
Based on what I'm reading, my gut says we probably don't.
Yeah.
But I want to reach out to the county assessor, because if Jonathan did do the count last time you guys talked about this, you have to you have to work with the county assessor to do that count. So she would have provided some sort of information at that time on the count then. We've just had enough development that I think we're probably not going to qualify. The process is fairly seamless though. You know, work with DLGF, the county assessor, you get the number of new development houses done in the past year. It hits like as 1% of the total number. If you're over that percentage, then you don't qualify. If you're under, so let's say we think we're under based on me talking with the county assessor, we would apply, and DLGF basically checks all your numbers and verifies all your information, and they issue you a certificate of eligibility.
So if it's a yes or no thing, yes, no, then we move on to other projects.
Yeah.
If yes,
Right.
then we can incorporate and significantly, you talk to, say, the academy, and others saying, okay, do you want to do something like this? Because we're not going to get, Kevin Berger's not coming back to expand his work because he's up doing
He's not at
La
this
Paz.
time.
He's just booked out elsewhere. But the opportunity to say any developer and could participate, we would actually be able to establish a TIF, baseline assessed value, then the incremental taxes on top of that on residential TIF goes into funds that we can pump into, like we do businesses, utilities, and other support that helps that developer build something. And again, hypothetically, you could do a 50 unit TIF and potentially sell a third of them to the academy, and they just use them as rentals.
So I guess I have a question, Paul. I don't know if this has ever been strategically discussed with CRC before. But let's say we were having that conversation with the academy today and they said, yeah, we would love to do a housing development, 70 to 80 houses out there on State Road 10 off of, where we have property, you've got utilities there. But yeah, this is going to be really costly to us from an infrastructure standpoint. You've got to put roads in, you've got to connect that utility all the way in. So even if it weren't a residential TIF, based on it being workforce housing for, say, faculty and staff, even if they built it exclusively for faculty and staff, where they own the properties and rent them, if it were, we would still collect the tax base to well, no, that's on the
Only
other
if
side of the road,
if
isn't
you
it?
incorporated it into.
Yeah.
So we'd have to
the
annex
town.
it, we'd have to annex it.
And I'm not sure. And I
So
know that
That might
multi-house,
potentially, like, let's say you couldn't make it a residential TIF based on us not getting certified. But let's say they were willing to do annexation on that development. And I guess strategically thinking, or like from your standpoint, I would want to know, would you view that as a place to make investment because it's of it being workforce housing? Can you even justify that investment being CRC? I know you invested in the paddocks from a utility cost
so
standpoint.
I'll defer the history part, because I remember property that we just talked about. At a point in time, your predecessor, Rich, was saying we were talking about putting a 3-story senior living or some sort of multi-unit living facility there. And that wasn't necessarily a residential TIF. So I have to go back and take a look. I thought there was a category within an apartment. What am I saying? The Cove.
Yeah.
Is in the TIF. It's a business. So there is a way to do that. It's not a bunch of homes on quarter-acre lots, but there is a way to do that. We'd have to research it. But because I do remember they were talking about it, never took off, but they talked about that.
Because the paddocks is already in the TIF, so that investment, aligned okay, right? Because you guys had taken in some of those properties along there. And there was also
And I don't know how,
potential
I have to go
commercial
with
development.
personal ignorance. I don't know how that counts in. And I think, and we did support of on the utility side of that. And that's where we were.
Yeah, I think it was, Phil had said restricted to utilities or
Yeah,
infrastructure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at the time too, we were talking about commercial development,
Right.
potentially being the highway side of that property. So it was like, okay, there's potential for commercial development. We need workforce housing. It's pretty easily justified as part of our planning process. So I'm just wondering if the same might be true, because that's gonna be a question the academy would have.
Yeah.
Like, are you willing to help make an investment in this workforce housing?
Right.
You know, because for us, we would capture the assessed value of those properties, even if it's not coming to the CRC, it comes to the town. But also for us, it keeps those people in town spending their money because they have full-time jobs here. So to me, that would be a win-win, even if we couldn't make it a residential tip.
Yeah.
But it's also, to me, if the academy is at all thinking about this, now is the time to have that, start those conversations. Just so at least we all know where they stand, both CRC, the town council, et cetera. But I'm just throwing it out there for you guys to kind of think that one through.
And, I mean, I'll do paper research and look through and go out on AIM, because there's been communication around residential TIF about on that recently. And, you know, Sally, maybe you talk to Phil, or, you know, it's just kind of put that, your question in front of him. I just remember,
Yeah.
you were there when Rich was talking about, I mean, you were here when Rich was talking about a multi-housing unit within where the old mobile home was.
I actually don't recall that.
And maybe he was just exploring it and then
Yeah,
forgot.
and, that would have been not the town doing it, but
Well, he said there was a CRC, he seemed to think there was a CRC path to support that.
Yeah, at one point they looked at putting single-family homes
Yeah.
potentially there, and I think the CRC even did an appraisal of that property.
right, to,
Yeah,
as a possible purchase.
but then Stellar was launching at the same time, and we ended up getting a much larger property going with Kevin Berger, because that property was limited in size for what we were trying to do.
Right, yeah. Well,
I do have, I'll just give you guys these in case you, there was Karen gave me a document from TGL or DGLF. This is your process for that certification. There's an older memo that the state came out with, and then they updated it basically. So I've given you both of them.
Thank you.
Just, for light reading when you're bored recreating in your new retired life, Gary.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Karen, I'll give
At
you
leisure.
I'll send you.
No need for a motion.
Actually, I might have that.
Wow, I may get to page 3.
That's right. You having trouble sleeping? No, I just read those.
yeah, read this, it'll put you to sleep in no time.
Oh, yeah, I think. You don't hear about
Because it just,
Yeah.
it just seems the current environment has only made things worse. I mean, we could find I'm still amazed how full the paddocks in Sand Hill is, and people are clamoring to get
If
in.
we had 100 houses in the less than 200,000 range, I think they would be filled with faculties.
Whichever has
Yeah.
the best.
He just disappeared, and honestly, I had done a little homework on him because he's from Monroe, Michigan, where my brothers lived the last 27 years. So I just called him and said, ask around about this guy. My brother called back and said, don't count on him completing any kind of project. He's really, the theory was in Monroe that he found investors and then took off. So that was the word I got, but I have no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Because he still owns all that,
It's, and
right?
it's expired at this point, like.
It has,
You
yeah.
have to go back and get,
I think it expires somewhere around 1st of August, doesn't it?
I think it expired last
He's talking about investments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was last August.
Yeah, it's-
He re-upped it once and
Yeah,
then,
and then didn't extend it.
didn't extend it after that.
But he still owns it all. Or the investor.
I assume so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good
So-
to know.
Is there any, you want to wrap this up? Is there any other member input?
I'll
Got anything?
just go right away. I gotta say something.
Yeah,
I still,
I'm going to go to the others
sure.
and then we can all leave and you can talk.
I'll take a minute.
Bill, do you have anything?
I don't have any coffee, so.
I have no-
John, do you have anything?
I'd like to continue working with Jenny here on thinking about our goals long-term, because we do have
Yeah.
likely hefty amount of revenue, and it's exciting, and really to think about how to best leverage it.
Yeah.
And I think knowing what projects are coming from the town and the town manager, and so how to best leverage our funds for this. I hope that we have long, robust conversations in the future.
Karen, do you have any?
No, I'm gonna go back and submit some projects. I'm just kidding.
Gary, you have
We've been
anything?
done it for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I just, Jenny's comment, we could fill houses that are less than $200,000, but, a new house, I don't think you can build a new house with the land for 200,000.
Yeah.
And I'm just speaking general.
Right.
Yeah.
And for 200,000, I think you're gonna find a house in town that needs a lot of work that may not be to the taste or expectations of someone that's working at the academy, right? So it's a dilemma. I don't know how to solve that problem, but
The other side is the academy has the land, so they can subsidize that cost into it. If they retain ownership and lease them, they can control costs to some degree for their end user who wants in the housing. And you can do agreements, even if they were to sell them to their own faculty, they can have first rights to buy back, or they could set up a,
That's what they did when they did the West Terrace and Fleet Parkway.
I mean, at least they
Yeah.
wouldn't have the cost of the land because they already own that.
Right.
You're right, the construction costs are so high, maybe we're talking more like 250, 300,000 or
Yeah.
less.
it's hard to say. And then I think, just from a psychological perspective, you want your workers invested in the community. You don't want them renting. So you got to, you want them to sign a mortgage.
Build equity.
And, yeah,
Yeah.
those kinds of things
And
where
with their primary residence.
it's
So
harder.
that they
Yeah.
take the homestead loan, the Homestead Act, and they almost a
Yeah.
requirement to move in there. You have to make this your primary residence. Sure, there are ways.
There are a number of private independent schools in even more expensive areas than Culver, Indiana, where schools don't own property, but what they do is that they help support through a loan program, the mortgage, or not the mortgage, but
The loan.
the loan and the payment in order to get the home and the purchase.
Sure.
The down payment. Thank you. I was blanking on the down. And anyways, that's that's something that Culver does, but I don't know how that creativity could start maybe becoming part of the thinking for Culver as they try and retain people. And I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't know how this might come into play in the CRC and how we can sort of support that. But that could be a way of keeping at least Culver faculty here. I'd be curious about your faculty and staff, Karen, and how far away they're coming to work here.
Yeah, unless they're a 30-year veteran or plus, they're not living locally.
And if you look at the infrastructure costs to the academy, put in roads, curbs, sidewalks, utility connections, that's a huge part of that construction cost. So that would be, that's why I'm kind of posing that question of, would CRC want to invest in that just for the sake of workforce housing? Or,
Mhm.
I mean, that the level of income faculty are making would sustain a good lifestyle in Culver. I mean, you can still afford to go out to eat, spend your money on our local businesses and stuff like that. But that infrastructure piece, I just know from my experience at Troyer Group, when we would do site planning for huge development, the percentage of that infrastructure cost really impacts on that development. And the more you can get that down, the more you can get the price of the house down.
Well, and that's a thought too, where some towns, and I think Wabash is one of them, they did both the program of, they've supplemented people's down payment for their homes, the CRC did, but they created 5 areas of development. They put in the streets, they put in the infrastructure, and then lowered the cost of
Lower the
the
cost of building a home.
home.
And
Yeah,
you work with a builder who can say, I want to work it, here's my target price.
Yep.
And you even do you do mortgage forgiveness or mortgage payback at a certain point, 3 years into a home, you made your primary residence.
and West
you get X.
Lafayette did the same thing. And then they stated that those you couldn't do a rental property within a certain radius of Purdue University, because then that made it that you had to buy the home.
Mhm.
So there's those
Yeah.
things.
There's a
in
problem,
CRC.
it sounds like there's a problem that needs to be solved.
These
Just finishing up before Sally cuts me off. The only other thing I want to add,
Just tips,
is-
residential tips is new.
the other thing I want to add is Karen,
It's just a tip.
the school, we probably need a group, somebody to work with what the school's doing, because we don't have you talked about some projects and we're still kind of hidden. I think there's an opportunity with what's coming out in funds down in your world, as well as what we should be doing with workforce. I think that's something we really should focus on as a strategic pillar as well.
I agree, yeah.
Okay. Have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Actually, she wasn't making a motion. I'll second you.
Sorry. I thought you were bringing a motion. I apologize if Gary is bringing a motion.
Yeah, Gary motion to adjourn.
Emphatically.
All seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.